Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of From Recovery to Discovery. My name is John. I'm a human being and your host for today. Just sort of a note, I say that I'm a human being because in the rooms of AA and NA, if we want to be accepted, we have to identify as either an addict or an alcoholic. Both of which are not scientific terms, and so by saying my name is John and I'm a human being, I am reclaiming my identity as a person with both good and not necessarily bad, but characteristics that I can work on. The full spectrum of emotions. So yeah, that's just for the people that are like wondering, like, why does he keep saying he's a human being? Like, of course he is. Is he an alien? No, that is the reason. Today I will be reading out of the Just for Today, which is the daily reflections or daily cult indoctrination manual for Narcotics Anonymous. This one is called Self Centeredness. The spiritual part of our disease is our total self centeredness. Basic text, page 20. I'm going to read through the whole thing, and then there are certain parts that I've highlighted that I wanted to start a dialogue about. And I am reading this so that you don't have to. What is self centeredness? It is our belief that the world revolves around us. Our wishes, our demands are the only ones worth consideration. Our self-centered minds believe they are capable of getting everything they want if only they would be left to their own devices. Self-centeredness assumes total self-sufficiency. We say that self-centeredness is the spiritual part of our disease, because the self-centered mind cannot conceive of anything greater or more important than self. But there is a spiritual solution to our spiritual malady. The 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous. The steps lead us away from self-centeredness and towards God-centeredness. We strip away our delusion of self-sufficiency. It's horrible. By admitting our own powerlessness and seeking the aid of a power greater than ourselves. We acknowledge the bankruptcy of our self-righteousness by admitting we've been wrong, making amends, and seeking knowledge of what's right from the God of our understanding. And we deflate our overwhelming sense of self-importance by seeking to serve others, not ourselves. The self-centeredness afflicting our spirit can be treated with a spiritual solution. The 12 steps. Just for today, my guidance and my strength comes from a higher power, not from my own self. I will practice the 12 steps to become more God-centered and less self-centered. Wow. I gotta say, I can't stand this one. I mean, if you just acknowledge or listen to the language of it, it is so demeaning, insulting, and the whole, one of the main premises of AA is ego deflation at depth. And so to me, that's what really stands out about this Just for Today reading. Essentially, this is basically like insinuating that every single person who struggles with some sort of problematic habit, which is what we call addiction is just this self-absorbed, narcissistic, personality disordered individual who needs to be completely broken down in order to be built up in the image of the cult. So remember, I think I've said this before, but in these like daily reflections and just for today's, pay attention to the we language. Any organization that groups everyone in it into we or our, that's essentially taking away our individuality and breaking us down to be part of the group. And so we all need to stay in the center of the herd. We're not unique. All of these things that they say in the rooms. We say that self-centeredness is the spiritual part of our disease. How can there be a spiritual part of a disease? As I've said before, real diseases are observable phenomenon in the body. You can see them through a microscope or through phenomenon. There is no such thing as a spiritual part of our disease. But we say that self-centeredness is the spiritual part of our disease because the self-centered mind cannot conceive of anything greater or more important than itself. I know that when I was like abusing drugs and alcohol, it was because I was in an incredible amount of pain, and I hadn't really taken a step back from them to analyze the pattern of my use. But I still deep down was a good person. You know, I still cared about people. I still loved people. I still went out of my way when I was up for it to try to help people. And what I'll also say is that this whole idea of selfishness, we live in our own individual body. It's like the analogy of like when you go on the airplane and they tell you, you know, if the oxygen mask falls down, you need to like put it on yourself first before you put it on your child or someone else. We're not of any use in this world unless we take care of ourselves first. You know, a proper diet, exercise, sleep. This whole idea that we need to totally get out of self and serve others, aka, you know, be of service in the organization. It's so, I don't know, it's codependent, it's toxic, because it's like if you encounter people that are very controlling, narcissistic, like many of the, you know, sponsors that like I encountered in the rooms and many of like the old time members, if the whole literature is formulated around getting out of yourself and being of service to others, it's just a recipe to be taken advantage of. So yeah, I don't see that as being healthy. Now, they also say in this just for today, the steps lead us away from self-centeredness and towards God-centeredness. And there's this whole idea of what Frank Buckman, who started Moral Rearmament and which turned into the Oxford group, this is all like the sort of the history of how AA came to be, what he called God control. And so he was advocating for all of society to come under what's called God control. And I find this really interesting and kind of fascinating to look at from like the paradigm of being outside of the fishbowl of the 12 steps, because when we're trying to have conscious contact with higher power, which how can you have conscious contact with a higher power? I mean, I don't think that there's really anyone out there that can like channel the one spirit of the universe and be controlled by God. So everything that we think of as seeking the aid of a power greater than ourselves, in reality, it's all being filtered through our own thoughts and our own desires and our own wishes. So it's not really realistic at all, because it's all being filtered through the self. But at the same time, selfishness is, you know, our main sin or whatever in this paradigm. looking at it through a lens of critical thinking, I don't know if you agree, but it just doesn't really make any sense to me. So another one is we strip away our delusion of self-sufficiency by admitting our own powerlessness and seeking the aid of a power greater than ourselves. How insulting is that? Delusion of self-sufficiency. Like breaking us down and making us believe that we can't take care of ourselves and we need this outside force, which I will say also that if people in the rooms are struggling to come up with like a higher power of their own, it is encouraged to make the group your higher power, aka Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, God, group of drunks. So yeah, it seems very unhealthy and dangerous to let this group of people who also, their only qualification for giving us what often is like terrible advice is that they've been in this paradigm longer than we have, and it's like seeking advice from people who also can't trust themselves and can't trust their own thinking. Like it just does not make sense, and it seems incredibly dangerous. But I really believe that like self-sufficiency is actually the answer. Learning how to take care of ourselves, have healthy routines and habits, that is the answer to moving on from the habit of addiction. So it's almost like it's insinuating the exact opposite thing, but it's postured as this is the way to, heal and keep our disease at bay one day at a time forever, right? And we deflate our overwhelming sense of self-importance by seeking to serve others, not ourselves. I think it's a balance. I think that taking care of ourselves comes first, taking care of our needs, and then I think it's important to try to be of service in our own unique way, not having anything to do with NA or AA, but just like, I don't know, there's a farm that I really love to volunteer at that like provides housing for people with disabilities, and the farm is kind of attached to it and provides them with a place to work, and for people with and without disabilities to like grow organic fruit and vegetables for our community. I mean, I guess that's being of service, but I just do it because like that's what I like to do. When the springtime comes around, that's like where I like to go and volunteer in spring and summer. So that's my thought. Some of my thoughts on the Just for Today. I also want to read you guys a comment on that, a stepper made about me on my podcast with Sobriety Bestie, and comment on that because I kind of think that it fits into like this whole selfishness paradigm thing that I just read and spoke on. So the context is that this stepper saw the thumbnail for my last video on my other YouTube channel, Cycle of Growth, which the thumbnail is of me and my best friend, and we had been trekking in Nepal for like 9 days to get to Everest Base Camp. And so they have these tea houses where you can go and stay the night before you continue trekking, right? And so we had been out all day, trekking through the very, very cold Himalayas. And so like we're sitting down for lunch in this tea house, and our noses are all red because, we were like out in the cold. And there's all of these flags behind us of people who had summited Mount Everest. And so I could see that like in his eyes, he sees this picture and he thinks, oh, I'm drunk, I'm sitting in this bar and I'm drunk, and so he said, dude was literally drinking alcohol in the thumbnail of his most recent video. You all should check it out on Cycle of Growth. The most recent video thumbnail, he's 100% drinking, but he left that part out from the actual video itself. And then he starts some new channel about how much he's learning and growing approximately 3 months later. Dude knows nothing about being sober. Sorry. How could you just like look at a photo and then like just come to like your own conclusion that I'm 100% drinking? Like I deprogrammed my like desire to drink a long time ago because I just feel better not drinking. And like I don't have to justify that whole experience to you or to anybody. I was on that expedition with actually a group of people that were all sober, and it was focused on like enjoying the Himalayas and like not altering our consciousness. So this person is totally off base there. And so I responded essentially with that. Totally didn't acknowledge that at all. But his next comment's the one that I really want to highlight. That some of the toxicity and even the selfishness within the paradigm of the 12-step programs. Bro, I know people in the rooms drink when they say they're sober. It's probably about 20 to 33% of longtime AAers. I mean, I do agree that some of them do, but did you take like a scientific study of that? Like, you're just throwing numbers out there, I guess. You are only hurting yourself. I could really care less if you die or end up with cirrhosis of the liver. I have way too many of my own problems. Some have to die so that others can live, right? I mean, that's we've heard that in meetings before from like the old timers. And just speaking of selfishness, like what a self-absorbed thing to say, you know. This person is a member of this fellowship that's supposed to be super spiritual and kind-hearted, and you know, people people like him pop onto like Sobriety Bestie's Facebook page or you know my video or whatever and just spew hateful, judgmental opinions at us. I find it interesting that like I don't go on like pro 12-step groups and like talk shit about members or their program. So I always find it fascinating when they come on people who are creating content for those that were harmed by AA or NA and are trying to deprogram and essentially spout cruel comments. And I just found that last one to be it kind of hit a nerve with me because my time in the rooms actually did end with a suicide attempt. And so someone coming on and essentially saying like I could care less if you die, yeah, I think that's fucked up. And I think that's, you know, when people respond with those types of comments, it reminds me of why I left. It reminds me why I feel like it's so important to speak out and have an excess of content for those of us who want to leave and deprogram and become free. So anyway, that's the video of the day, probably the video of the week, and as always, I hope that your journey is going really well, that you're being kind to yourself, that you're being kind to others, and I can't wait to see you next time. Have a great day.